Well, I think it is primarily what Islamabad has stated that we want to bring a pause because of the humanitarian angle to it. One. Number two, Islamabad does believe that it has achieved significant military objectives, which it was seeking in with regards to Operation Ghazbat-ul-Haq. And then, most importantly, it is also a very direct signal to Kabul that maybe they can take this time to reflect and actually decide that will they continue to pursue terrorism as a policy option with regards to creating influence in the region or something else. And with regards to everybody else speaking on it, I think the Middle East has its own war to answer. So while that may be a position there and that may be something on the table, but at this moment, unfortunately, all eyes are on Iran, all eyes are on the Gulf. This is purely bilateral. I think that, of course, the pressure has been on Islamabad from day one. But Pakistan is very clear. We are not doing this to, get revenge from Kabul. We are doing this because, in accordance with the UN Security Council Resolution 137 and 1267, the international commitment with regards to Afghanistan is quite clear that the Afghan territory should not be used for terrorism, whether be it at a regional level or be at an international level. And most importantly, that there should be no safe havens in it. Furthermore, it also very specifically states that there should be no support with regards to financial terrorism or actors who should support terrorism through financial and other means in Afghanistan. So, and what's also important to bear in mind is that this is a resolution through which, 20 years of the war in terror was actually, conducted in Afghanistan and all under Chapter 7. So Pakistan is not doing something which is one against international charter with regards to already an existing framework which exists there under Chapter 7, which allows for the use of force and allows for the use of sanctions and all necessary measures to stop that. And secondly, also with regards to Article 51 of the UN Charter, because Pakistan is the country which actually faced 53 different attacks on its border at the heels of the attacks which we suffered in the Amman Bargah. Well, for sure, it is going to have a serious impact because one thing is for sure that there are going to be no safe havens. Because if there are going to be safe havens, Pakistan will militarily act. And what's also important to understand is that this is a temporary pause in the operations, not a complete cessation of operations, number one. Number two, we need to bear in mind, just like what the Russian Foreign Ministry had stated, that according to various reports and even according to the UN itself, there's more than 30,000 global terrorists which are right now residing in Kabul and in all these adjacent areas. And what's also interesting is that we were also bearing witness to almost $7.1 billion worth of arms which was left in the region. And when you combine all the facts together, what we had was a regime which was not developing its own people, not transferring power, not taking into consideration women's rights or anything else, but was continuing to focus and harbor terrorism as a constant policy choice for regional maneuvers and international presence. And that is what Islamabad has actually taken an action against. Whether it will create significant dents on TTP, of course, it is going to give a very serious bolt to their organizational capacity on ground, but at the same time, also a very clear message that if they continue with this policy option, the operations will continue from Islamabad's side. That's a very interesting question, considering the fact that the UNAMA is not even present in Afghanistan itself. So it's interesting that they've made this report. And it's also furthermore interesting that they have not even done anything concrete with regards to the UN human rights organizations, or even for that matter, the rights of the Afghan women, the children, and most importantly, the Afghan refugees who have been affected by the Taliban regime. And let's not forget that this is an old habit of the terrorist-led organizations in certain places where they've used human shields. Pakistan has been very, very precise with regards to ensuring that there is no collateral damage. Nonetheless, let's be very clear that some of these military facilities also had certain shadow facilities which were created very close to such facilities. So in order to, decipher, and so in order to create a necessary deception effect by the Taliban regime so that it doesn't come off as something. But once you look at the explosions, once you look at the secondary explosions, and once you look at the images, it's quite clear that these were military facilities and these were not civilian facilities. It's unfortunate that very senior and I would say very reputable international media has been reporting just one side of the story, which makes us believe that perhaps there is more to the story and more to the narrative which is actually coming out than actually the authenticity of the military action and the precision of the military action which has been taken on ground. That's a smart question. And the answer is Islamabad just wants one message for Kabul to receive, and that is that they'll have to say no to terrorism. Because if they continue to aid, abet, sponsor terrorism, be it be at the behest of Israel, be it be at the behest of India, be it be at the behest of whatever narco terrorism or smuggling, organized crime interface which they have, the message is very simple. They need to be responsive towards their people and act like a government, and that's their decision to come. But what's important is that they need to understand that there are some regional obligations, and first and foremost, regional obligation is that they will not think that terrorism is going to sway Pakistan or Islamabad's decision to be soft towards them, to allow them all these concessions, and they continue to become a narco-terrorist state. If that is going to be the future of Afghanistan, then perhaps the operations will continue. And we have the patience to fight another 20 years of war because Pakistan is the only country except Afghanistan which has faced the highest number of terrorism in this world in the last 20 years. Almost 500 terrorist attacks a month. So this is not a small number. The number of casualties which we have received as a result of terrorism runs in thousands of people, not even in hundreds, perhaps even far bigger and far huge, more huge than what we have seen in all the NATO countries combined. And then let's not forget that we have been hosting the Afghan refugees, not in the first wave, not in the second wave, but also in the third wave. And what's also interesting is even those people who are on the third party placement program have continued to remain in Islamabad since 2021, and they refuse to go back either to these countries or to Afghanistan. So as far as Islamabad is concerned, our message is very simple. And that is that if you want Islamabad to act in a proactive manner, then you will have to act like a proactive state. This means you come to Pakistan through visas, not through just illegal maneuvers into Islamabad. That's not going to be allowed. Number one. Number two, if international institutions are going to sponsor these third-party placement programs, then they should ensure that these people actually leave Islamabad after 6 weeks, not become permanent residents for 5 years. And number three, if there are going to be structures which are going to support terrorism in one way or the other, and they look the other way, because they are in some regional alliance or some global alliance with India or Israel or the enemies of the state, then of course Islamabad is, perfectly within its right to take necessary military action, political action, and economic actions to ensure that the narco-terrorist effect of the Afghan regime does not preclude the future of Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. Actually, they are under this misgiving. The war which they fought in Afghanistan was different. That was a war of freedom, war of occupation, a war where they were the necessary right actors, good or bad, right or wrong. The fact of the matter is that that was a country under occupation in terms of how the local population saw that. So they had different support. But once you are trying to fight a war of terrorism in another country, then it's altogether a different ball game. One. Number two, the Pashtuns of Pakistan have their own identity. You cannot override the Pashtun identity on the basis because you can speak the language. Number three, the tribal representation of Islam, which they're holding, as a measure of terrorizing their own population, is something which is limited to them. People in Pakistan have a very different nature and different understanding of Islam, and perhaps the tribal understanding of Islam would be met with disdain here. That's another thing. It's not that they don't have the weapons or they don't have an air force. They believe that irregular tactics and asymmetric warfare with almost foreign terrorism and foreign terrorists, which is almost 30,000 according to one estimate, 8,000 according to another, 20,000 according to another, and out of them, 12,000 are foreign terrorists, people who have fought in Iraq war, ISIS, TTP, ETM, you name it, and IMU, they've got them. And they think that by this, they can impact on regional countries. That's not going to happen. Maybe it's going to happen with other countries, but not with Islamabad. And most importantly, we have paid a very high price for our counterterrorism strategy. The people of Pakistan, our forces, and most importantly, our businesses, because they have been affected by the smuggling, organized crime, human trafficking, you name it. The cultural effects of the war on terror, the cultural effects of the first Afghan war, the second Afghan war, and the third Afghan war have been huge. So this is a decision which we haven't arrived overnight. This is a decision which we have come over after a very long time. And let's not forget the global territory, the people who were the global leaders in this fight against terrorism just left Afghanistan in 2021 with a negotiated settlement with two warring states. One United States, another the Taliban regime, without any formal transition to a political economic structure of the Afghan state. So what we are dealing with are different groups. We're dealing with people who are Guantanamo Bay detainees, who are right now in this position to become ministers, and not only become ministers, represent their own individual interests. And let's not forget, what is the Taliban regime actually delivered for its people other than terrorism? So if they have actually delivered, fine, we would be, we'll stand corrected. And if they're doing these mining agreements with China, or they're doing these mining agreements with Russia, how much of that is actually transferred into actual economic, political, public development? And let's not forget about the money which the UN agencies, humanitarian agencies are actually giving in Afghanistan, because that money, unfortunately, gets auctioned off by the Taliban regime members. Dollars come in aircrafts. It gets, auctioned to Taliban by the Taliban with Afghan rupees. So it is technically fueling black economy, and it is technically fueling terrorism. So there is a larger global responsibility in terms of accountability, transparency, both for development and also for military security needs of Afghans and also the Afghan regime itself. So there is a lot of question mark which needs to be done. As far as Islamabad is concerned, Islamabad recognizes all the challenges, and also the fact that as far as Islamabad is concerned, the red line is very clear. We only need one thing from Afghanistan. We are not hoping for a regime change. That is something which the people of Afghanistan have to decide for themselves. We're just hoping that Afghan regime understands that if they will sponsor terrorism against Islamabad, Islamabad will respond back in kind. Unlimited access to global funds for terrorism. Because you see, the fact is this, that all this, what you have said, if the goal of the Taliban regime was to improve the people, then yes, everything would have been a challenge. But if they are auctioning, humanitarian dollars in the name of development, it's a question mark. If they are failing to become an actual Afghan government from a transition government, so they're not becoming inclusive and still base themselves on exclusivity, then it means there's a problem here. And then the third challenge over here is the fact that there is the silent Afghan economy, which is basing itself on three things: terrorism, because they've got 30,000 international terrorists. So these 30,000 international terrorists are not living there for free. They're used as regional proxies. Number two, they have got smuggling. Smuggling, which is like, just to give you statistics over here, just between Pakistan and Afghanistan, it's $75 billion worth of, smuggling effect, which transfers to the Afghan government. And in comparison to that, Pakistan only receives $500 million worth of trade. So the trade differential for smuggling is not in 1 billion or 2 billion, it's $75 billion a year. And when it comes to the third angle, that is narco-terrorism and narcotics alone, Afghanistan is producing almost $89 billion according to UNODC per year. And if you put in the latest statistics, there's almost a $1 trillion worth of drugs which is coming out of Afghanistan per year. And out of that per year drug, 44% is passing through Pakistan, with 4 routes actually going to Iran, one going to Turkey, second one going to the Asian Triangle, and 44% actually being consumed by Islamabad and Pakistan in different parts of your next generation. So we're talking about almost a $3 trillion economy going to a handful of people who are terrorizing their own population and now intend terrorizing the region. That may be a story which the world is comfortable with, but as far as Islamabad is concerned, we are not ready to live with organized crime, terrorism, and most importantly, a state which is going to see its existential future based on narcotics, organized crime, and terrorism, and then believe that we should be okay with it. Yes, we will continue to degrade their military capability. Yes, we will continue to impact on their infrastructure if it is going to support terrorism. And yes, we will continue to keep the Pakistan-Afghanistan transit trade closed unless and until it comes up with the standardization of trade as acceptable in global trade relations, and something which should be based on actual trade dynamics rather than blackmailing. That's not going to happen. We are not going to support communities of war so that this becomes a war economy which sustains on itself based on the dark side of conflict. Well, that's the nature of the Afghan regime. They're not a unified group. This is a group of people who have come together because they believe in organized crime, they believe in terror, they believe in regional matrices. So this vision is always there. But let's not forget, they have 3 major sources of comfortable money, which was coming to them. One was from terrorism, and second one was coming from the United States under $4.1 billion a year under the Security Assistance Program, which Pakistan has talked to the Americans, and now the Trump administration has said that there will be no future money which will be coming for the Afghan National Army, which interestingly had left the country after the Taliban came to power. But the United States Department of Defense had continued to give this money. Second thing which was funding this was the $7.1 billion worth of American weaponry, which was left, because for an average weapon which would cost, say, $20,000, they were selling it off for $3,000, even less than that. So that was the drug economy. Combined with that, the weapons, combined with that, everything which you can think in the illegal spectrum was what we were looking at a state in effect. So yes, the fission is going to be there, but I think more than the Kandahari group or the Kabul group, it is going to be the larger Afghans which are going to come about and perhaps put that pressure. What's also interesting at the moment is this, that despite all what we have heard about the Northern Alliance and about everything else, we haven't actually seen any resistance on ground picking up traction. So this basically means that there was something more to the Qatar process, which everybody agreed upon, and who are still benefiting from this process. So there needs to be a larger check by the Afghan population and larger check by the people who are representing these various factions to speak up. And lastly, I would like to just put in something here that Afghanistan is not a normal state. This basically means that Afghanistan actually works through something else, and that is that it works through the border dynamics. So this means that whichever border trading route is open, that is going to be the route which is going to build up. Now, considering the fact that Iran is under attack and Pakistan has taken a different action, the only route which is actually available to them is Lapis Lazuli route, which is from Central Asia and going to Turkey. And now this would also mean that the power dynamic of trade will also shift to the Northern Alliance. So this means there's going to be a different ethnic group which would be in charge, more Tajiks, more Herat division, and so on and so forth. Now, if that can give the non-Pashtun elements in Afghanistan bigger traction in the government, then perhaps there is some sway. But at the end of the day, that is going to be an Afghan decision, not Islamabad's decision. Islamabad has just one red line. That is that they have to say no to terrorism and have to stop these acts of terrorism. And if they do, Pakistan will use its right as per the UN Security Council resolutions 1373 and 1267 and 551 to ensure that it doesn't become a permanent safe haven for terrorism. Well, the answer lies in the facts. The facts is this, that there is a security corridor which exists between New Delhi, United States, UAE, and Israel. And that's a security corridor which is based on Abraham Accords. That's a security corridor which is now resulting in Iran actually attacking back UAE. And also the fact that this is based on hardcore defense agreements, which they have done, not over 1 year, but over tens of years, like almost 2 decades. So since 1999, they have been involved in these agreements, and these agreements have now matured. And as a result, this is the security worldview which they're holding. So Taliban regime, which is also, let's not forget, is a manifestation of the Qatar process. And Qatar is also part of the US defense security alliance in the Middle East, is going to represent the same order. And since India's worldview of this region dominates the global worldview, at least on its Western allies, that is why Kabul and India, and let's not forget that India actually was very close to the NDS. They were the ones who actually trained the ANA and then became later, in cahoots with the Taliban regime, is a clear manifestation that the interests over here are linked to the security corridor, linked to the economic corridor, and linked to the global understanding of how they believe that actors here will actually form and create that group. So that is a question of India, Israel, UAE, United States, and Qatar, which are part of the security corridor. So we don't have any misunderstanding with regards to why India's worldview is dominating in Kabul. First and foremost, for Kabul, they believe that since they have become the regime, they believe that since they're part of the global security order, with United States in charge and UAE and India, funding and financing all of that, they were in a position of security. And by carrying out this regional actor approach, they could actually sway on the region. Secondly, with regards to China, of course, China is quite apprehensive that Afghanistan doesn't become a hotbed of terrorism for ETM and becomes a challenge for their development in the northern sector. But that said, the fact is this, that in each process, when we asked them and provided them with actual documentary evidence with regards to terrorists on ground, every time our action was met with resistance, with total denial, with temporary pause. And whenever we paused, after some time, we had different acts of terrorism. And let's not forget that this start of this counter-terrorist operation started with a terrorist attack on Amman Bargah in Islamabad, and then followed by the attack on Pakistan's border with almost 53 different border post attacks simultaneously by terrorist groups. And then day 1, day 2, day 3, if you look at it, there was a continuous wave of different terror groups which came to our border and continued with this action. So it was not something that it was an isolated act of terrorism which Islamabad responded to. It was the manifestation of acts of terrorism and different waves of terrorism, after which Islamabad felt that negotiations were not actually moving. So Islamabad said no to terrorism. They are believing that this is the hallmark of them actually being tied up into the global security influence. And that is where the Taliban regime saw its domestic legitimacy being given global legitimacy if they acted in cahoots with New Delhi. And I think that is the mismatch of perceptions. And what they also, I think, may have mismatched, which right now United States is facing in the case of its allies, is that when it actually push comes to shove, it's very rare that allies would actually come and save the day. So the real question for Kabul now is to learn that will Israel and New Delhi actually come and pick up the economic cost of surviving a regime which may not survive the military action. First of all, this nomor of Pakistan believing that they were a strategic depth was never officially Pakistan's position or understanding. This was a symbolism which was given. One, because strategic depth basically means that the Pakistan army would have gone back, stayed in Afghanistan, and fought a war of attrition. I don't think it has ever happened in Pakistan's military doctrine that there were any plans that you would go back and actually reposition Pakistan army and then fight a war of terrorism, war of attrition from there. One. Secondly, the reason why Islamabad said so is because Islamabad's policy had always been a peaceful Afghanistan is a peaceful Pakistan. And since at that time, the Taliban were representing the domestic popular view, the idea was that it will become mass movement, and that is how that movement actually survived. What actually happened at the end of this transition is that the group which came into power was the group which actually got out of Guantanamo Bay, bought a lot of international prestige from the Qatar process, the Qatari group. And then you got people who knew how to play the war dynamics in order to secure fundings from themselves. And last but not least, we did not dismantle the Afghan state once, the Afghan state actually went under. So the 20 years of anti-Pakistan rhetoric, which was, carried hand in glove from 2001 till 2021 by global actors, that everything which happens in Afghanistan is Pakistan's fault, is the generation which you're dealing with. So this is the Taliban regime, which has actually grown in war, which has been given this propaganda that Pakistan is the cause of the problems, not the cause of the solution. And the earlier people, like even Haqqanis and the others, they have been eliminated and sidelined. So the differences between bigger groups, smaller groups does not exist. What you're dealing with is the Guantanamo Bay detainees, prime assault team working in global politics and regional politics to redefine Afghanistan as the first proxy for terrorism in this region. And unfortunately, the first country to learn that counterterrorism can be challenging if it is met with military determination and national resolve.